G'day everyone, welcome to Two Wheel Workshop. I'm Brody, and in this video I'm going to rebuild the forks for an XS650. Okay, so what we've got here are 35mm forks. These were found on some of the later model XS650s. The earlier ones came out with 34mm forks, and I've done a rebuild video on those, which I'll put a link up to now. So here is the fork assembled. Alright, so I've already disassembled one fork, so I can take you through all of the individual components. Starting at the bottom here, we've got an Allen bolt that goes into the bottom of the lower fork leg. We've then got the fork seal, a fork seal retaining washer, a fork seal retaining clip, and a dust boot. Beside them, we have the stanchion, which has a stanchion cap that has a rubber O-ring. You want to make sure that that's in good condition. And below that, we've got the damper assembly, which consists of a cup, a spring locator, the damper piston, and a circlip. And beside that, we've got the preload spacer, a locating washer, we've got the fork spring, the damper rod, and the damper rod seat. Alright, now to rebuild the forks, you're going to need some tools. You're going to need a 17mm Allen key, an 8mm Allen key, a ratchet or something to use those with, something to lever out the fork seal. I'm just using this shitty old screwdriver. And then you're going to need a special tool which fits down inside the stanchion to hold the damper rod while you tighten up this Allen bolt. Alright, so this is just one that I built myself. It's a 480mm long piece of 22mm tube with a T-bar welded on the end. Out of the end of that, you've got 70mm of 12mm rod protruding, and that has a 5mm by 20mm slot cut into the end of it. Now that slot locates on a pin in the end of the damper rod, like this, and prevents it from turning. Alright, so what we're going to do now is disassemble the forks. The first thing you're going to want to do is clamp it securely. Don't do what I see a lot of people do and just clamp the stanchion straight into the vise, because you're just going to damage something. What I've done here is I've got the lower triple in the vise with soft jaws so I don't damage the stem, and I've clamped the fork into that. Alternatively, if you haven't even taken all of this out of the bike yet, just loosen the cap before you even take the forks out. Alright, so just take your 17mm Allen key and take out the cap. So this is under tension from the spring, so you want to put downwards pressure on it as you undo it and make sure it doesn't come flying out. Alright, there's really not that much pressure on it. Alright, from there, take the fork out of the clamp, and then you want to just tip the guts of it out into a container, like this. Alright, give the fork a few pumps just to get all the oil out. And then leave it upside down to drain for a bit. Alright, so the next thing you're going to want to do is clamp the fork horizontal like I've got it here. You're going to need your 8mm Allen key and your special tool. Compress the fork leg and then insert the special tool into the top of the stanchion, and then just try and get it to locate onto that damper rod. Alright, and then what you want to do is try and undo the Allen bolt in the bottom of the fork. This one is quite tight. Let's try something else. That doesn't want to move. Alright, so that's just not working. What I think's happening is the bolt's actually seized inside the lower fork leg. So I'm going to clamp the caliper mounts into the vise and try and break it free like that, and then I'll use the tool just to get it out of the damper rod. Let's give that a shot. There we go. And there's that one. Okay, so I probably could have got away without the tool for disassembly, but for assembly I'm definitely going to need it to hold the damper rod when I put the final torque on the bottom bolt there. Alright, so while I've still got it in the vise, I'm just going to take off the dust boot. Try and stop oil from bloody going everywhere. Alright, so once most of the oil's out, you never get it all out. It's a very messy job. You can just remove the stanchion from the lower fork leg and the damper rod with it. Nine times out of 10, the damper rod seat will come out as well, but in this instance, it just stayed in the lower fork leg, so just tip that out. Right, so next, you want to just tip the damper rod out of the top of the stanchion. There it is there. Alright, and now you can remove the damper assembly, which is in the bottom of the stanchion here. 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't even bother with this because most of the time you're just going to be replacing seals, but I'm just going to show you how to do it in case you want to. Alright, so I don't know how well you can see it, but you can see in the end of the stanchion here, you've got this circlip. Now the holes in that circlip are really small, and I don't have a set of circlip pliers that will actually fit it. So what I'm going to do is going to look really dodgy, but it's the only way I can get it out. Alright, now my hand's probably going to get in the way, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the end of a nail in each end of that circlip. Apply downwards pressure and then just clamp it with these pliers, and out she comes. Alright, so there's the circlip. Out comes the damper piston and the spring retainer, I guess you'd call it. And there should be a spring up in there somewhere. There's the spring. And the spring retaining cup. Alright, now as I was saying before, I wouldn't normally bother even pulling these out. I'm just showing you how to do it in case you had something in there that was broken. But while they're out, I'm just going to have a look at it all, make sure there's no wear or anything on any of the components. Everything looks good, the spring's still intact, which is probably about the only thing that you'd be able to replace without replacing the whole fork anyway. So yeah, that's that bit. Alright, so the next thing you want to look at is the condition of the chrome on the stanchion itself. Now you can see here and here where the upper and lower triples clamp, there's some wear. That's not really all that critical for the fork to seal. What you're really interested in is the portion of the stanchion that runs inside the actual fork seal itself. You want to make sure that there's no pitting or rust or anything there. There's some tiny little blemishes on this one, but it's nothing critical, and I think it should be fine. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is get the actual seal itself out of the lower fork leg. You can see in the top here, it's probably had some water sitting in there for a while, and it's all rusty and pretty gross looking. But in amongst all that rust, there is a fork seal retaining clip. You want to find the end of it and get a small screwdriver in behind it and just lever that out. Like so. Under that, you'll have a fork seal retaining washer, and that comes out just like that. And now we'll put the lower fork leg in the vise so we can lever out that fork seal. Alright, so once again, I'm just clamping the caliper mounting points of the vise, not the actual fork leg itself, because I don't want to crush it or crack it. Put that in there nice and securely. Right, and then I'm going to take my big screwdriver, get it in behind the seal, and just lever it out. This one's in there really good. So you can see how mangled this thing's getting. Nearly there. Alright, and that's got the old seal out. Right, so I probably should have mentioned it earlier, but there's also a bushing in the top of the lower fork leg here, and you can get that out just by removing this spring clip here. I'm not going to bother doing that because I wouldn't even know where to get new ones to replace them, and it's pretty unlikely that that's going to wear out anyway. Alright, so we'll get the forks back together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the seals. It's got two sides. The side with the flat surface obviously goes towards the top. I'll just run a bead of fork oil around the outside of that to make it a bit easier to get in. And we'll just push that down in there. Alright, to get it the rest of the way, I'll just use this socket. This is the biggest one I've got, it's 32 mil. It's probably not quite large enough, but if it doesn't work out, I'll just use a pin punch and knock it around the outside to get it in. That seems to be going alright. Maybe not. Probably go this way. Right, so that's that in. Next we'll drop in the washer. And then we'll replace the spring clip. And that's that one done. Alright, so the next thing you want to do is replace the damper assembly. Alright, so first you've got your cup with your spring. And then this spring locating thing, and that goes in there like that. Then you've got your damper piston. Now this only goes in one way. You want to make sure that the damper rod seat can fit into the bottom of it like that. If you have it around the wrong way, it won't go in. So make sure you've got it around that way. Then that all goes into the bottom of the stanchion, like so. And we replace the circlip. Now you'll remember that I said that I don't have the correct circlip pliers, so this is going to be really awkward. Alright, so using the same dodgy technique that I used to get them apart, I'll get it out. I'll put 2 nails in the circlip like that. Get in there. And I'll just position it over the top of the stanchion. And I'll try and compress it and get it to seat back in. Alright, next you want to take your damper rod, drop that in the top of the stanchion like that, give it a bit of a shake until it drops out the bottom, and then replace the damper rod seat. Then we'll take our lower fork leg, clamp it in the vise on the caliper mounting points. Put a bit of oil on the stanchion where it runs inside the seal, and then we'll reinsert that into the lower fork leg. Next we'll take our Allen bolt, we'll make sure that it's still got its copper sealing washer, and just for a bit extra I'm going to put a bit of gasket elastic around the base of the bolt as well, just to make damn sure that it doesn't leak. And then we'll replace that. Right, then we'll take our special tool, place it down inside the stanchion and then rotate it till it lines up, and then we'll retighten the Allen bolt in the base of the fork leg. Right, so now that we've done that, we'll replace the fork spring. The tightly wound end goes towards the bottom. And then we'll replace the fork oil. Now what I've got here is 5-weight fork oil, which is lighter than factory spec. According to my dad, it works better for rebound dampening. I've got it in my XS and it seems to work fine, so I'm just going to keep going with it. Alright, so the manual says that we want 155 cc's for these forks. And this is a 60 mil syringe. So I'll use this to measure it. Try not to drop it in the process. Right, there's 50. $100, $155. Right, so now that we've done that, we'll replace the washer. Make sure it goes in the right way up. Preload spacer and the fork cap. now that we've done that, we'll just replace the dust boot. And she's done. Alright, so that's the forks rebuilt. Hopefully you got something out of this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.